This is DW News coming to you live from Berlin. The UK's departure from the European Union begins today. Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May has signed the letter that will kick off Brexit. Next step, thrashing out a divorce settlement with the bloc. Our correspondent in London is standing by. Also coming up, U.S. President Donald Trump scraps climate change regulations. He says it'll create jobs and boost America's coal industry. Critics are calling it an assault on American values. And a man-made catastrophe with hunger being used as a weapon of war. After 2 years of war in Yemen, we report on the millions of people there on the brink of famine. I'm Terry Martin. Thanks for joining us. The Brexit process is starting today, with the United Kingdom formally filing for its divorce from the European Union. The official letter of intent was signed by Prime Minister Theresa May last night. Today, this letter will be handed to the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, by Britain's ambassador to the EU. Now, that will set in the clock ticking, and in 2 years' time, Britain should be out of the Union, ending a 44-year-long relationship. Well, on social media, the triggering of Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty is being referred to as Brexit Day. Those who voted leave are celebrating. This Twitter user posted a cake saying, "Freedom awaits, happy Brexit Day." Well, there are different feelings, of course, among those who voted to remain in the EU. Some are pragmatic, didn't vote leave, but majority did. That's democracy. You move on and adapt. The world's not ending. Well, others are more pessimistic. Actor David Schneider says, "So grim. It's like the captain of the Titanic has had 9 months to steer away from the iceberg, but instead accelerated towards it." Well, our correspondent Birgit Maas is part of our team in London covering Brexit. She's been talking to members of the public and members of the parliament there, engaging the mood. Hi, Birgit.
Ian Duncan-Smith, thank you very much for joining us, and back over to you in Berlin.
Thank you so much, Birgit. That's our correspondent Birgit Maas there in London. And, of course, our team here in Berlin, in London, in Brussels. We're all covering this story very closely. Our business desk is also taking a very close look at Brexit today. Helena from our business desk has more.
That's right, Terry. Let's take a look at the numbers then, because it is the day of reckoning. And with that, it's back over now to Terry.
Thank you, Helena. The Scottish Parliament has voted in favour of a second independence referendum before the UK leaves the European Union. Scottish lawmakers backed First Minister Nicola Sturgeon's bid to hold the vote once the terms of Brexit become clear.
The result of the vote on...
And we'll be following the Brexit launch formalities throughout the day in London and in Brussels, so keep watching DW for the latest. Now, to the U.S., where President Donald Trump has signed an executive order to scrap a number of regulations aimed at curbing the effects of global warming. He says it will create jobs and boost the coal industry, but it sparked anger from environmentalists who say the bill will put people's lives at risk.
Surrounded by coal miners, US President Donald Trump signed an executive decree aiming to roll back the Clean Power Plan.
Still to come, we'll be looking at the humanitarian situation in Yemen. Welcome back. You're watching DW News. I'm Terry Martin. Our top stories. The countdown to Brexit begins today. British Prime Minister Theresa May has signed the letter that will trigger Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty. Now, 2 years after the outbreak of the war in Yemen, millions of people there are struggling to survive. There's a severe shortage of housing, clean water, and sanitary facilities. Children are especially hard hit with rampant chronic malnutrition. Our next report explores how hunger is being used as a weapon in the conflict. Let's bring in Jamie McGoldrick here. He's the UN's humanitarian coordinator in Yemen and joins us now from that country's capital. How serious is the humanitarian crisis in Yemen right now?
Well, I mean, the scale is massive. 19 million people needing some kind of assistance. And at the same time, within that, you've got 7 million people who don't know where the next meal comes from.
Now, it's alleged that hunger is being used as a weapon in the conflict in Yemen. Would you say that's the case?
I would say that what's happening is that the economy's been weaponized.
In Berlin, what would you ask the international community to do to help you address the crisis in Yemen?
Great. Now's the time to act because the threat of famine has been already indicated in this country.
What chances do you see for a solution to the conflict in Yemen? Because supposedly that's the key. If this conflict could be ended, then perhaps you could go about your work and help those people.
Well, quite right. I mean, there has to be a peace agreement. There has to be peace. The war has to end.
Jamie McGoldrick in Sana'a, Yemen, thank you so much for talking to us. Now, moving on to Mozambique. Recurring tensions there between the country's ruling party and the opposition has caused thousands of people to flee across the border into neighboring Malawi. To help house them, Malawi has reopened one of the refugee camps set up during the civil war in Mozambique in the 1970s and 80s. DW visited the Luwani camp in the south of the country to see how people there are coping. Just a reminder of the top story we're following for you here today on DW News. The countdown to Brexit begins today. Simi will be with you at the top of the next hour.